The following is a presentation of Surprise Church. El siguiente programa es la presentación de la iglesia Surprise.
We are in the middle of a series right now called Breaking Busy. It's a kind of a play off the show Breaking Bad, although we will show no clips of anybody making meth or anything like that, if you know the show. It's a really a concept that we've had a lot of interest in as people have said, hey, your church is talking about busyness. Well, what time do you worship? What time, where are you? Because that's an issue that, as we said last week, busyness and over busyness, too busyness in America is as common as poverty is in places like India. In India, if you're a wealthy person, you are stepping over the poor people all the time. There's nowhere to hide from it. In America, there's nowhere to hide from busyness. There's nowhere to hide from overload. So I want to describe for you today what I would call a kind of a foreign alien planet. First of all, let me ask you this question. How many of you believe in aliens? Quick show of hands. How many people? It doesn't have to look like this. How many? Okay, just 1, 2, 3, 4, honest, 5 people. Okay. How many? Somewhere in outer space, whether it's a molecular level or little green men, you believe that there is life somewhere out there. How many are? Okay, we're at least 50%. Okay, all right. Okay. Some of you might be from another planet. I don't know. We'll see how this goes today. Right there, John, our drummer, is actually from the planet what? Okay, good. I had my suspicions about you a long time ago. I want to describe for you, but to prove there is alien life, I want to describe to you an alien life. Listen to this. Imagine this. This is a strange planet. On this planet, Zebutar, they live a slow, deliberate lifestyle. Everybody's just really chill. They don't have any issues with sleep deprivation. There's a ton of time for leisure. If someone says you want to play checkers, you got all the time in the world. There's tons of time for prayer. There's tons of time for rest. There are few travel plans that you have to worry about making. There's just not a lot of travel. There's not a lot of mobility. There's not a lot of out-of-town tournaments and games, and there's not a lot of out-of-town trips. And so there's very few out-of-town expenses. Really, people on this planet only communicate directly. They don't do a lot of digital communications. It's more face-to-face or maybe telephone. People on this planet have time to help other people. Like if your neighbor is needing something, you really have time to help. It's not as though you want to make a gesture of, let me know if there's anything I can do, but please don't ask. On this planet, they have time to help their neighbor. Church involvement on this planet is like central to life. It's central to community. It's a big deal, and it's not just something that you try to squeeze in. It's central. It's pivotal. It's a pillar in the community, and it's life-giving. It's not something that's just over in the top that just kind of you have to try to squeeze in if and when you can. It's civic events, parades, other things. Everybody shows up because they just kind of build solidarity and pride in the community. Nobody in this community on this strange planet has a planner. Nobody really wakes up with a to-do list. And all of this, finally, is accidental. I mean, nobody says, okay, I'm going to do all these things. I'm deciding to live this way. On this strange planet, on this strange alien place, this is how life is. You want to know where this is? This has been most of human history. People sleep when the sun goes down. They sleep until the sun goes up or the rooster crows. And this is also the case in most third world nations today. I'm going to invite Geraldine up. Geraldine is representing our Surprise Around the World month this month from Cameroon. She and I were having a conversation. As one of the things that she's going to do is just help us understand a different cultural context this month. And Geraldine, first of all, let's welcome Geraldine. And Geraldine was sharing with me the difference she noticed when she came here 8 years ago, 10 years ago?
I've been here for like 6.5, getting to 7 years.
And what I was going to ask you to share, which what you shared with me, was what did you notice in terms of the culture of busyness or just the different pace of life in America from what you were used to back home? Tell us about it.
Okay, good morning, church. I came from one of the planets he was just explaining, this planet. And over there, as compared to America, one, we didn't have internet when I was growing. So I didn't know about Facebook. I didn't even know about my emails. So all we did was connect with family. But when I came to America, I'd never known how to check an email. I've never known how to talk to somebody on Facebook or see people through videos, because I had a face-to-face communication almost every time. And the strange thing is I haven't caught up with the lifestyle over here up to today. It's so difficult to adjust from talking to people live and getting to talk to people on the internet. And one thing I noticed in Maryland in particular was people didn't really pay attention to you. Where in my community back home is everybody in everybody's business. We lived in a community that was bigger than Bismarck, and I knew everybody by name, what they did. I knew their grandkids, but in Maryland, nobody knew me. I had a person who was shot just in front of my door, and I didn't even know who that person was, or they didn't even know me, and we just passed by. And when Pastor Mark spoke last week about the phones, I had to drop my phone this week, and I discovered something. I discovered I was gradually becoming an American. I'm forgetting this, and I give it to you guys. I don't know how you do it, but if you can create time sometime, just go to this planet or another planet out of here. You'll find life so different than what you live here, and the work, the school, the kids. I don't know how you guys do it, but I applaud for you guys. Thank you very much. That's all I got to share. And if you have any questions about this planet, you can ask me after church.
Thank you, Geraldine. Thank you very much. See, I thought it would be great to hear from Geraldine, because, it's one thing for us to say it's busy here, but another person who's been on one of these different planets come and say, you guys don't realize how different this is from most of the world. America's work week alone is 14 hours than many Northern European countries, and it's a different world even from other Western countries. But if you spend some time in a third world context, you see what most of human history has experienced, and that is a much, much different lifestyle with much of a nature-based pace, sun up to sundown, communal-based life, and not living based on machines and clocks and planners and pressure and deadlines. And those things do stuff to us. They do stuff to our psyche. They do stuff to us physically, and we're going to kind of talk some more about that. Refresher from last week, if you missed it, the difference between saying, oh, it was busy back in my day, your grandfather or great-grandfather might say, true. However, not at this pace and not at this level. The number of unprecedented choice and complexity, the rate of change in these areas has never before been experienced. And that requires some humility from us, because we're not just confident that we can just keep up with this pace, because it's not happened before. We have to be humble enough to say, God, you have inserted a limitation nature into my human nature. I can't expand beyond the bounds of the finite nature you've given me. Otherwise, I'm pretending to be you. And so when I'm surrounded by unprecedented choice and complexity, it requires that I step back with humility and say, God, what are you calling me to do, rather than what can I possibly get done? Today, more than ever, that choice is being forced upon us. Another way of looking at this, we talked about last week the 5 environments of human life. Physical and cognitive are the specific areas where the rate of change is off the charts. It's exponential. The curve, imagine there's millions of new websites that start every day. I'm the same person with the same brain. I can't possibly search them all. There's millions of new social media projects and products and invitations and opportunities online that I could receive, but I can only keep up at a certain pace. And when I try to keep up with the rapid rate of physical and cognitive advances and progress, we noted that humans are linear, and so that causes pain. I find myself keeping up with something that my social life, my emotional life, and my spiritual life simply can't keep pace with. And so we start neglecting essential areas of human life to keep up with other areas of human life. If we neglect the social dimension to keep up with the technological dimension, we start to suffer from depression and disconnection and anxiety and frustration. And I'm guessing all of us have been there on some level. And of course, the spiritual is another one of those layers. I have this temptation where instead of praying to God, I can post something to Facebook, and it has that same rush effect of I am releasing some kind of care, concern, burden, or joy upward, but it's different. It's neglecting entirely the spiritual dimension, or it can't. So that can have substitutes, but those substitutes try to keep up with progress, cause pain. Or to summarize it, how would you like to read that book? We had people throw words out last week like stressful, uncomfortable, need margin. And that book page is represented by the life that God built us to live in which there is margin. When I read books, anybody like me, I like to underline, I like little squiggly faces. If I don't like what the author's saying, I put a frown and say, "You crazy, man," or something like that, in that accent, yes. And I like to interact with the book, but the margin makes the words digestible. Without the extra space, it's stressful. Life is the same way. The margin in our lives have been eaten up by progress, causing a certain kind of stress and pain. A diagram that I think helps to spell this out: we want to live in a yellow, but oftentimes our load from the left outstrips our limit so that we live in a state of overload. And when you live in a state of overload, that's where that pain comes in. You live with exhaustion, fatigue, burnout eventually, just simply from outpacing your social, spiritual, personal dimensions, neglecting them to the point where you're just a machine trying to meet the pace of life, and it doesn't work. And so we miss out on that simply having a page with a margin on it. Space for life, space for relationships, space to help a neighbor, space to step forward and say, "Hey, I got this." Space to pray, space to sleep, space to rest. We live in a culture without margin. And so it's countercultural to have it. Unlike the strange planet we described today, you must make a decisive effort to live this way, or you will not. And in Cameroon, I'm guessing this is just how people live. Here, you have to fight for it. You have to break the power of busyness over your life, or you're going to live on overload. Now, if you ever go to the mall and you get lost, you go to the sign that says "You are here," right? And there's a little arrow. It doesn't matter how small the mall is. I tend to get lost in malls, so I'm always looking for that kiosk with the "You are here." And then I try to figure out which way is north, and I'm still lost. But this is a pretty simple diagram. If you're on the state of overload, today I want to talk a little bit about the question, what's your exit strategy? If you're living in that place that actually you're going to be less productive the longer you're there, and you're going to cause more issues for yourself and others the longer you're there, and miss out on some great opportunities, then the question is, how do you not stay there in a culture that programs us to be there? And it will more so every single day. It's going to only enhance. And so the countercultural step is to say, well, what's my exit strategy? How do I live in this place and yet operate and step out of that place? Because the reality is, most of us can't just snap our fingers and rearrange our whole lives. There's obligations, there's responsibilities, there's efforts that you're responsible for, there's jobs, there's multiple layers to your lives and families that you can't just snap a finger and have it simplify. But you can, like an army trying to take back territory, start fighting for just the little things that make a difference, and then make a long-term strategy towards the big things that make a difference. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And the question I really would challenge you, if you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm in this busy phase right now, but after it's over, I'm going to take notes today, and then I'm going to pull them out when I'm through this. I want to challenge you with that question, because the reality is, I have never seen an exception to this, that if you don't start now, you'll never start. I talk to high school students who say, when I graduate, man, I'm going to have so much time, so later. When I talk to college students who say, I thought I was busy in high school, but when I graduate, man, I'm just going to have a job with no homework at night. And they get a job and get married, and they get home, and kids, wow, I'm busier than I thought I would be. And then your kids get older, and then you're shuffling 3 kids to 10 things in the same night. Because, we're overachiever families, and you realize that every chapter successively gets busier. And so if you don't start in a busy chapter, the next busy chapter, you're going to continue a habit of busyness. And on top of all of that is we get mentally, chemically addicted to busyness. Every time you get a text message, do you know there's a chemical brain dump? Boom, you get the notification. Oh, you get an email. Boom. It used to say, you've got mail. Now they just go boom, like Pavlov's dogs, and we start salivating. And so every time you get that, you get a rush. Every time you accomplish something, experience something, check something off your list, go to a social media site, you get a chemical dump. And so our brains become addicted to the never-ending rush. And if that's the case, what are you going to do when you have 4 extra hours of time? You're going to fill them with things that give you that chemical dump. And so we have to learn during our busy seasons rather than wait for the next season and get addicted to busyness. Time won't resolve it. Okay, I'm going to give you just 4 things today to write down, sermon note, insert in your bulletin, kind of made an outline for you. 4 things that I think are going to help get this exit strategy in place for your life. It's not going to answer all your questions. No sermon can do that. But it's going to get you started, I think, in the right direction and hopefully give you some things that you're really going to be able to grab onto and work with in the week ahead. First of all, number 1, Breaking Busy series, we're really challenging you throughout to journal. We're challenging you to write some things down. Track how your time gets spent. It's crazy. When you do this with your budget, and when you do this with your calendar, and when you do this with your clock, you learn about yourself. And sometimes I'm tempted to lie to myself when I'm doing this. Oh, spent 9 hours sleeping. Right. Like no one's reading this, and I'm still like, prayed extra long today. But just be honest. If you want to show it to somebody, great. But really try to be honest. Don't do the halo effect thing, because it's just for you. And just really try to track how many times, if you can't count in a day, in an hour, do I check my phone? I heard the average was over 100 for most people. And if you think about cumulatively how much time that takes, it's over an hour where you're just pulling your phone out, punching in your code, or swiping it just to look, let alone the time you spend on it. The average person spends 5.5 hours per day consuming video, either on their phone, computer, or their TV screen. That's crazy. And as you journal, one other thing, other than just how you break your time and how many times you check your phone or what you're doing with your time, one thing to track is is the unexpecteds. Track the sinkholes in your life, the things that just occur that just drain time or energy or effort. I went to Guatemala about 10 years ago. Luckily, I was able to get my passport in time and got to Guatemala with a group of seminary classmates, and it was amazing. We went to Lake Atitlan in the mountains, and it was like this old volcanic crater. It was like heaven on earth. I mean, it was just this amazing natural display of beauty and the lore, the folklore, and the culture. It was just really cool. And corn was really holy in Guatemala, and so like when you drive around, people are harvesting corn by hand, but they're just very careful with it. And if they drop corn on the street, they pick it up kernel by kernel, just because corn is like part of their creation story for the native Guatemalans. And we flew into Guatemala City, and it's a little bit of a big and kind of dangerous city, so you have to be careful where you go. And I'm so thankful that we didn't fly into Guatemala City during one of the recent hurricanes, because during that recent hurricane, this happened in Guatemala City. I might have driven over that street when I was there. I don't know. It's called a sinkhole. And they're all over your life. They're all over our budgets. They're all over our relationships. They're all over our energy consumption, our personal, relational energy. They're all over. And when you track, like, okay, I got an email at work. Email is a huge sinkhole. I got an email at work, and it threw me this way for an hour and a half. And I went home behind, sick, frustrated, and tired. And then I carried that tired into how I related to my family. And I was grumpy, busy, and distant for the entire time I was home. That email is a sinkhole. I need to do it, delegate it, or dump it. I need to figure out how my life doesn't get just depleted and the ground goes out beneath me and I'm worthless in the other chapters. I'm overloaded because of a burden that plopped into my lap. Now more than ever, you can have more interruptions from more channels and chapters of your life than ever before. I can be reading my Bible on my phone. I get a text message. I get a Facebook message. I get an email message. I get a Twitter feed. I get a notification from my Bible software that I've got somebody else reading their Bible at the same time. I don't care. Stop it. I'm trying to read my Bible, bro. I'm having an argument with my phone to leave me alone while I'm trying to have quiet time on my phone. Interruptions are greater than ever. There are more things to people than any time in human history. So there are more things in your house that you have to figure out how to get batteries for and how to take care of and how to clean, how to put away than ever before. And those things can become sinkholes. I spent this much time today fixing that many things today. Sinkholes. Might need to simplify. Secondly, speaking of simplification, a couple things. When you say simplify, that doesn't just mean get the garbage bag out and throw away 9/10 of your possessions. I mean, that can and maybe that should be. But when I speak of simplify, I want to just put a couple choices in front of you. Number one, is this optional or essential? I think we fill our lives with the optional as if they're essential. Okay, so this is hard because the optional is fun, chemical dump producing, engaging things, but is it essential? And in this culture, we are challenged, counterculturally, I would say, to be challenged more and more so, to say, if I don't boil things down to the essential, I'm going to miss the essential. You have to leave margin for the essential and the unexpecteds that just arrive there. So really challenge yourself to think, I know maybe I can for a while, but should I? Is this going to be a sinkhole? Is this going to be a drain on my life, energy, faith, relationships, spheres? Is it optional? If it's optional, it can go. Is it stressful or helpful? Now, a lot of times this is tricky because you might think, oh, this is going to be helpful, and then you do it and you're tired afterward. Like, watching a movie after a long day at work, you might say, I had an extra long day, I'm going to watch an extra long movie to unplug. So you get Lord of the Rings, A Tale of Two Cities, Twin Towers, the extended version, right? So this has got all the unedited clips in there where Gollum does a bunch of extra things and whatever. And by the way, speaking of Lord of the Rings, our electric guitar player taught himself Elvish from Lord of the Rings. Luke, can give Luke a hand. He learned Elvish. I'm not sure what that means, but I do know that you need a lot of margin to learn Elvish. So you're my sermon illustration today. Although with the baby, I'm guessing you're going to be learning baby talk before you learn any new Lord of the Rings languages. But is it stressful or helpful? I can throw a 3.5-hour epic movie in and I can get done, and I didn't rest. I just distracted myself for 3.5 hours with a very, very good movie. Is it helpful or is it restful? And that's to kind of translate into the last one. Is it restless or is it restful? Is what I'm doing, if you go to a party and just get obliterated and you wake up in the morning with a headache, was that stressful or helpful? Was that restful or was it restless? Did it actually provide another thing you need to recover from, de-stress from, or deal with decisions you made during? Or you have to figure out how to pay the bill for? Is it helpful? Is it restful? Is it essential? And if you start asking those questions about even little things in your lives, sometimes it's easier to start with the little things and then work up to the big things, like the extra this or the extra purchase of a big thing. Start with the little things and work your way up, and you start to get that filter stronger and better. Here's a good example of how this rolls out. Luke chapter 10. This is a great. Luke 15 is a chapter this church is built on, parable of the prodigal son. Luke 10 is kind of like the warm. It starts to ramp up and warm up like a good intro of a good song. Jesus is going to someone's house, going to hang out. He goes to Martha and Mary's house, just plops down. Now imagine this. I had you imagine aliens before. I think this is going to be at least possible. Imagine Jesus knocks on your door and says, got time to chill? Would you look at your watch, phone, calendar, or would you drop everything? Well, this household invited him in, but came face to face with the lack of margin. Watch this. But Martha, when Jesus is sitting in her living room, was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. So Martha, Jesus is there, and she's like, I gotta cook a quiche. So she runs to the kitchen, and she's looking for, I've never made a quiche, eggs, whatever else goes into quiche. And then she's like, oh, he needs greens on the side. So she's washing lettuce. And she's like, oh, freshly squeezed orange juice, only the best for Jesus. And so she doesn't have orange juice. She's probably got to run down the street to the vendor and get the oranges, brings it back. Oh, man, I forgot salt and pepper. So she's got to go down to the Dead Sea and pick salt off the edge of the Dead Sea and crush it and grind it and whatever and go back. And then she's getting in the kitchen. She's like, oh, he needs the best silverware. So she runs down the street and goes finds like a guy who makes pots and plates and stuff. She got ones that had like a cool little Jesus fish on the plate, you know. And she's like, can you engrave this to Jesus from Martha? You rock. And she's like, well, it's going to take another 10 minutes. He's like, oh, hurry up. I got Jesus at my house. I don't have time for this. So she's like, love Jesus, whatever, you rock, whatever. And she gets home, and she's like, oh, I got to take a shower and do my hair special for Jesus. So she went to her bedroom, and she's getting, Jesus makeup style, like church makeup. She's getting all slicked up and Jesus up, and she got her choir robe on with a cross on the chest. And then she gets to the kitchen, and her sister is not helping. Her sister is sitting by Jesus talking about whatever Jesus wants to talk about, and she's ticked off. So she starts to get a little grumpy, like husbands. Have you ever been there where you're watching football? And maybe think about this today when football games are on. And you hear all clinging and clanging in the kitchen, and you hear all kinds of things going on. And you're like, oh, it's kind of noisy in there. Honey, could you keep it down? I can't hear the game. And it's still, and you don't hear anything. You just hear a grunt and like a hiss. And so you're like, wow, if you're going to be that loud, I'm going to turn the TV up. So you just turn the TV volume right up, subwoofer volume up a little bit, you hear the crowd rumble. And you hear all this clinking, and like, come on. And you're just like, whatever. And she's just not getting it. And then that leads to problems because your wife is like, what are you doing? Martha is blowing her top because she's doing all these things for Jesus without being with Jesus. And so she just has enough, and she needs to get a little third-party verification of her concern for her sister Mary, who happens to be all comfy sitting Indian style on their shag carpet next to Jesus' sandals. So she said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. She's giving Jesus a command. Have you ever done that? Lord, let me tell you how this goes. Do this. Done. You just walk away. She said, tell her. She's not going to listen to me. You tell her. Maybe if the Son of God tells her to get busy, she'd get off her butt and help me out in the kitchen with the dishes. I got your engraved plate all by myself. Tell her to help me. Now, what she's expecting is Jesus is going to step right next to her and say, yeah, Mary, what are you sitting here next to me for? Get in the kitchen and help your sister. I'll be fine out here. I got a copy of the New York Times or the Jerusalem Times. Come on. No, Jesus does it all. He looks straight at Martha. Says, Martha, Martha. The Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. You're worried about many things. Few things are needed, just one. And that's better. Evidently, overload isn't a new thing. Jesus saw it. where valid things, good things, even healthy things can just suck the life out of your joy. And they can prevent you from simply sitting down next to the God who made you and listening to his voice, listening to his voice of affirmation. What do you think he wanted to say to her that she didn't have time to hear? Dishes will wait. The floor will wait. Maybe Jesus would have helped her with it after she listened. And he says, it won't be taken away from Mary. She has it. She listened. The Mary and Martha story happens coincidentally after the parable of the Good Samaritan, in which an enemy foreigner alone notices and helps a victim of injustice. I say coincidence in quotes because Jesus, after this Good Samaritan, this enemy-hated Samaritan foreigner, walks by a man who's been beaten and robbed, he stops, notices, walks over, carries him on his donkey, cares for him, pays for his care. Whereas the priests and the important people of his own culture didn't notice, didn't have margin, whose lives were just built around something else. No coincidence that then Mary and Martha step onto the scene. Two more quick things. Number one, know your mission. It's a lot easier to have margin in your life if you have a reason to. If you look at your kids and you say, I want to be there for these guys. That's a lot more motivating than saying, I want margin in my life. So have a mission. And I want to challenge you also in your inserts. There's a URL. If you go to our website, you can learn about our DNA groups. We have a number of people here today who are in DNA groups, and they're just groups of 3 or 4 that get together every week or so, and they just talk about important things. They help each other get margin right. They help each other build boundaries right. They help each other repent and get forgiveness, and they remind each other who they are in Christ, and they make a difference together. And they're going to be owning a mission together, making a difference in the community together. So the goal of margin isn't just to have margin. The goal of margin is to live life as God wanted. And so at the bottom of this DNA groups page, day 5, even if you haven't done 1, 2, 3, 4 as a DNA group yet, we'd love to connect you to a DNA group, so let us know. But at the bottom is a passions audit. Click on the passions audit. It'll take you to a survey where it just calls you to write down the things that you're passionate about. Specifically, what is the gospel for in this city? Where does this city need good news? What neighborhood, people group, cause, or need does God uniquely call me to make a difference for? And as we field those from our community, we're going to start raising up the things that God has really kind of collected people around, and that's going to orient our community towards those things. So I challenge you to take the passions audit on that DNA groups page. So when you know, and we're going to talk more about mission next week, because mission is critical for margin. If you have no reason to live, you have no reason for margin. If you have a mission, you need margin. Lastly, when we pray, I think that we oftentimes miss a fundamental element of prayer, that we pray to trade something with Jesus. Listen to these words. Jesus is talking, saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." When you come to me, I want to trade your burdens for rest. Doesn't sound like a God who wants us busy. It sounds like a God who wants to relieve us of busy. Take my yoke, which a yoke, if you've ever seen an oxen pulling a plow, the yoke was like a wood thing that would be sandwiched around his neck, chains tied to it, and he would drive the plow forward. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I'm going to end with a conversation about this text that often happens in my heart between me on the one hand and Jesus on the other. So bear with me. Jesus over here. Come to me. Just a minute. Come to me. 1 sec. Come to me. You who are tired and carrying a heavy load. I'm not tired. I'm not carrying it. Well, I guess you got me. I am. I'm tired. I'm really tired. And I guess I am carrying a heavy load now that you think of it. In fact, I'm carrying such a heavy load, I'm not even sure you could carry the load that I'm carrying. Well, that's not entirely true, but I get your point. Okay, but why do I have to come? Because the best thing for me to do is get this done. I mean, I'll feel better when it's done. Just come to me. I don't have time to come to you. I have a list of things that need to get done, and if I don't get done, then I'll be stressed out about the list that I didn't get done. Just come to me. You who are carrying a heavy load, and I'll give you rest. Rest? Well, rest doesn't get the list done. Rest doesn't get the email sent. Rest doesn't get the texts out. Rest doesn't get the message sent. Rest doesn't get life happening. Rest doesn't do what I need to do. I can't rest. Come to me. I want to give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Wait a minute, you had me at rest, but now you're talking about put a yoke on me? Can't you just said, I've got a burden, I've got a heavy burden, and now I'm supposed to put your yoke on top of that. God, that's what you always do. You take busy people and you try to get them to put more stuff on their life. You try to get them to pray more and read the Bible more and try to go to church more and try to volunteer more and try to be involved more and try to be nice to their neighbors more and try to do more and more and more. Can't you see? You just said, I'm weary and burdened. Why would you come into our lives and always try to give us more? Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. You don't know what you're doing. Learn from me. Because I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart. And you're going to find rest for your souls, and until you come to me, you will not find it. For my yoke is easy. My burden is light. I want to take yours and bear yours and give you mine. Do you really mean that? Yes. Just come to me. Let's pray.